I still remember the scent of roses that lingered in my hair as I walked down the front steps. That afternoon, my husband, Harold, was gone, and the earth had barely swallowed the last shovel of soil before the family reconvened, not for mourning, not for memories, but for the inheritance. As I descended the staircase of our home, still draped in black, I caught the first sharp words from my son Joseph. Don't expect a dime from Dad's 92 million. He hadn't noticed me yet. Hadn't seen me standing there, a shadow in the doorway. My presence seemed to shock him. His face drained of color as he realized I was still alive. She's still breathing. Thought she'd be gone by now. Maybe we should check her pulse while reading the will. The words hit me like cold water. Yet I stayed still, letting them chatter and laugh over the remnants of grief that had barely settled. I gripped the stair banister Harold had polished himself, feeling the smoothness under my fingers. A reminder of the life we built together before it was claimed piece by piece by those who thought they could erase me. The house buzzed with movement. My grandson slapped bright green sticky notes on the grandfather clock. The leather armchair. The cabinet that held our wedding china. Each note screamed entitlement. This one's mine. His sister had her phone out. Blueprints on the screen. Mapping renovations for rooms I had inhabited for decades. Spa room. Better lighting. She muttered, as if I were already gone. I wasn't offered a chair. I wasn't acknowledged. My daughter-in-law floated past with champagne flutes. Was celebrating Dad's legacy. She chirped. He built an empire. And now we get to carry it forward. A cousin muttered something about ghosts. I forced myself not to tremble. Not yet. I was escorted to the mudroom, the makeshift bedroom for the living. Breathing woman who had built the foundations they were now stripping apart. The folding chair they provided wobbled. The plate of dried chicken and overcooked potatoes sat untouched on the counter. They didn't look at me. They didn't care. From the other room. Laughter. This house smells like mothballs and death. Let's strip the wallpaper and gut the kitchen. My grandson slapped an orange sticker onto the sideboard beside me. This one's mine. I held my tea in both hands, steadying the shaking of my fingers. I let them believe I was nothing, an obstacle in the way of their inheritance. Little did they know. The seeds of truth were already planted and nurtured in silence, waiting to bloom. 15 years ago, when bankruptcy shadowed our family's company, it wasn't the lawyers or the accountants who saved it. It was me. My dowry. My mother's emerald necklace. My wedding bangles. Even my engagement brooch, I sold them all quietly, wiring every cent to the company account. Harold didn't ask. He didn't need to. I whispered, "Use it," but never let them know it came from me. As they divided furniture and land, I recalled every moment, every sacrifice, every hand-scribbled proposal I had sent in under a pseudonym. The IPO strategy that brought in 40 million in new investments me name never attached. My mind hidden. My work unacknowledged. They laughed about soup while calling Harold a visionary. She built soup. He built an empire. They jeered. And they thought it was clever to mock me while sipping champagne. I kept silent. My hands warm around the folded bank memorandum in my pocket. The notarized document that proved my co-ownership of the family trust. I would let them celebrate their imagined victory. But soon, their laughter would collide with reality. In the quiet, I returned to the memories they tried to erase. I remembered the cinnamon-scented Christmas mornings, the hand-sewn curtains, the birthday cakes baked from scratch. I remembered holding Joseph as he wept over college rejections, whispering, "You're still enough." I remembered the night I wrote the IPO pitch. The market shifting. Harold pacing in the den. I wrote it all by hand. Sent it anonymously. Watched it become the foundation of the company's revival. They called him a visionary. And they never called me. But now, they would. I rose from the mudroom cot. Knees aching, and whispered to myself. They may have buried me in assumptions, but I was still thinking. I was still alive. And I had a voice. Dinner that evening was a lesson in arrogance and entitlement. I sat at the end of the long dining table, the folding chair wobbling beneath me, a cruel reminder of my place in their eyes. The plates clinked, the wine poured, and their laughter carried across the room like a weapon. Pass the salt, my granddaughter whispered to no one in particular, her phone tucked under the table. Joseph's wife giggled at some private joke, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, entirely unaware of the storm brewing in silence across from them. I observed, silently cataloging every gesture, every smirk, every imperious glance. They were dividing my life, my memories, and my home as if I were already gone. But I was not gone. Not yet. I reached into my pocket and felt the edges of the folder I had kept hidden for 15 years, a folder that could undo every smug declaration of ownership they had made today. 15 years ago, Harold's company was on the verge of collapse. Numbers that didn't lie stared us in the face like silent executioners. Clients, contracts, and even the house itself teetered on the brink. We just need one deal, Harold had said, staring into the fireplace as if it could burn away the shame. He didn't need to say more. I understood. I made a choice that night that no one would ever know. I sold every piece of my dowry, each family heirloom, and wired the money directly into the company account. I whispered to Harold, "Use it. Don't let them see where it came from." He didn't ask. That was his way. Strong on the outside, silent on the inside. That quiet choice saved the company, the house, and his reputation. But I stayed invisible, a ghost behind the curtain, the real mind behind the empire they praised him for building. The night I wrote the IPO pitch remains etched in my memory. Harold had gone to bed, exhausted from a day of board meetings and investor rejections. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of chamomile steaming beside me, and wrote until dawn. Every page was painstakingly drafted, every number calculated, every potential scenario explored. I sent it anonymously, under a pen name, eBay Sinclair. The proposal arrived at the office 2 days later. Harold presented it at the next board meeting, and the deal closed successfully. $40 million in new investments flowed in. The company revived, and no one suspected the truth. I never asked for credit. I didn't want the recognition. All I wanted was for Harold to succeed and for the company we built together to survive. The day of the will reading arrived with rain lashing against the courthouse windows. The room was modern and cold, glass walls reflecting the arrogance of my family. Joseph sat nearest the front, legs crossed, ring polished, confidence radiating like armor. "She'll be dead by next Christmas," he muttered to his wife under his breath. "Don't expect a dime." No one looked at me. No one acknowledged my presence. The lawyer, Mr. Alden, entered with the quiet authority of decades of experience. Everyone straightened instinctively, as if his mere presence demanded attention. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "Today we are here to execute the final wishes of Mr. Harold Brightwood, as stated in his legally binding revised will." The emphasis on revised caught no one's immediate attention. But it would. Soon. It would change everything. Mr. Alden pulled out a small silver voice recorder, clicked it on, and Harold's voice filled the room, measured and precise, though tinged with the weariness of his final days. "If my son ever speaks ill of his mother, deduce $1 million per word," the recording said. Silence hit the room like a physical force. Pens fell, eyes widened. Joseph's jaw tightened, disbelief written across his face. He looked at me, and for the first time that day, his attention was forced to meet mine. Mr. Alden handed out a transcript. The recordings were from the security system, captured 3 days after the funeral. comments about my being alive, my role in building soup, jokes about my memory, and everything that demeaned my presence in the house and in their lives. Each statement had a monetary deduction, adding up to a staggering total. As the transcript ended, Mr. Alden revealed the folders containing the original documents: joint trust certificates, notarized bank memoranda, investment agreements, and the handwritten IPO proposal. "This," he said, holding up the folded pages, "is the original work of Mrs. Eleanor Brightwood. Every intellectual contribution, every strategy, every dollar invested from her dowry is documented." The room went still. Joseph's face was white, his hands gripping the table as if it could anchor him to reality. His wife clutched her scarf. His children stared, mouths open, speechless. "You made soup," someone whispered. And yet, it was clear the empire they believed was built by Harold alone had been built with me, shaped by me, saved by me, and now legally recognized as my intellectual property. The documents didn't stop at the IPO. Mr. Alden pulled out a third folder, thicker and heavier than the first two. I knew what it was before he spoke. The patent, the one that had silently generated millions every year, credited to a pseudonym only I had used. 15 years ago, Mr. Alden began, shortly before Brightwood Industries avoided bankruptcy. An anonymous proposal was submitted. That proposal laid the foundation for the company's public offering. The pseudonym used, eBay Sinclair, belongs to Mrs. Eleanor Brightwood. Gasps filled the room. The air seemed to thicken. Joseph's wife pressed her hand to her mouth. His daughter dropped her phone like it had burned her hand. Joseph himself looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under him. The ledger that followed showed the royalties. $9,400,000 annually. Untouched. Waiting. All mine. They had believed the empire was their father's alone. But every decision, every strategy that saved the company, was tied to my mind. I didn't need the money. What I needed had always been something far more valuable. Recognition. Truth. The acknowledgement that I had been the spine while the world saw only the face. Joseph tried to speak, but the words faltered in his throat. "Mom, he stammered, eyes wide. "You spoke first," I said softly, my voice steady. His children, Catherine and Ethan, looked like the walls themselves had crumbled around them. They had prepared speeches, practiced gloating lines, polished their smirks, but none of it mattered. Their empire had quietly been built on the work of a woman they dismissed as irrelevant. I let them sit in their shock. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence was louder than any scream. The room, filled with glass walls and leather trim, reflected their confusion back at them. Every confident posture, every smug glance, evaporated in the weight of truth. After the will reading, I returned to the house. It was quieter now, the sticky notes still clinging to furniture like bruises. I moved through room after room, peeling them off, folding them carefully, and tossing them into the trash. The grand piano, the armchairs, the wedding photos, everything they thought they owned, I reclaimed not with force, but with quiet dignity. Room by room, I restored the house, not because I needed it, but because it had been mine long before they ever claimed it. The roses outside were gone, replaced with wine-tasting corners and remodeling fantasies. But the pomegranate tree still stood stubborn by the window. I knelt and watered the small rose bush I had planted for Joseph when he was 5. Just one brittle stem remained. Yet it would bloom again because I tended the roots. By spring, the house was sold. Not for revenge, not for spite, just because it no longer held the echoes of greed. I moved to a penthouse near the sea, wide windows letting in light, white curtains fluttering in the breeze. the hush of waves always near. I kept little essentials, a few memories, and the drawing from my youngest grandson, a stick figure of me next to a giant light bulb. Crayon scrawled words. You think better than Google. That drawing reminded me of my mind, my ingenuity, my quiet brilliance. The royalties continued, steady and quiet. They weren't needed for comfort, they were a reminder that my work, my intellect, and my sacrifices had value, undeniable and unerasable. With the financial freedom came a mission, recognition for women erased by history, by society, by families who refused to see their worth. I founded a small, quiet organization, scholarships, grants, and acknowledgement for women whose work had been stolen, ignored, or minimized. No galas, no ribbon cuttings, just a bank account, a mission, and the knowledge that lives were being changed, quietly and permanently, because I had finally refused to remain invisible. I stood on my balcony, looking out at the ocean. The wind lifted my hair. The sun glinted on the water. And I smiled. I had survived erasure. I had reclaimed my voice. My story wasn't over. And neither was my life. And if anyone ever doubted the quiet power of patience, sacrifice, and intellect, they would know now. Empires rise on backs unseen, minds ignored, and hearts underestimated. But even the quietest heart has the strength to rise, reclaim, and bloom. The days after the will reading were quieter than I expected. Joseph and his family had retreated, leaving the house eerily calm. I walked through the rooms slowly, remembering what each corner had witnessed. The dining room, once full of laughter and whispers of strategy, now echoed softly with my footsteps. Joseph had sent a terse email, the words formal and clipped. Well, resolve matters legally. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The law had already acknowledged my rights, my contributions, and my legacy. The truth wasn't a weapon, I didn't have to swing it. In the mornings, I brewed my tea, the sunlight spilling over the kitchen counter. I allowed myself to linger over memories, savoring them without guilt. Each day, I returned to the foldered collection of documents, letters, and patents that proved my role in everything. It wasn't about money. It was about acknowledgement, proof that I had existed as more than background noise, more than a helper in the shadows. Eventually, I received a request from Joseph. He wanted to meet. I agreed. Cautiously, he arrived at the penthouse, his posture stiff, hands folded, eyes avoiding mine. "Mom," he began, voice low. I didn't know. You didn't say. I said softly. You chose not to. His shoulders sagged. The man who had once commanded attention in every room now looked like a child. I erased you without realizing what I was erasing. You can't undo ignorance. I replied. But you can learn from it. That's what matters. We sat in silence, the hum of the ocean below filling the gaps between our words. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel anger, only calm clarity. I had survived their disbelief, their entitlement, their dismissals. I had survived my own patience, the years of silent labor that no one ever credited. I poured my energy into the foundation I had started. Its mission was simple but profound. Recognize women whose contributions had been minimized, erased, or stolen. I personally reviewed applications, awarded scholarships, and mentored young women stepping into leadership roles. The first recipient, a young engineer named Leela, reminded me of myself at 22. Eyes bright but overlooked. She had created a breakthrough in renewable energy, yet her team had presented it under a male colleague's name. I wrote her a check and a personal note. Your brilliance belongs to you. Claim it. Word spread quietly. Letters arrived from women I had never met, thanking me for creating a space that validated their contributions. The impact wasn't immediate or flashy, but it was real. Every story I received, every woman I helped, was a testament to the power of patience and persistence, of refusing to be erased. One afternoon, I sat on the balcony, notebook in hand. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, waves rolling with relentless rhythm. I wrote letters to my husband. Even though he was gone, I told him everything. The house sold, the family dealt with, the foundation growing, and my own sense of self fully reclaimed. I realized that legacy isn't measured in dollars, property, or plaques. It's measured in influence, in the lives we touch, and in the courage to assert our existence when others would diminish it. I had created empires of my own, not ones in boardrooms, but in hearts, minds, and quiet victories that could never be stolen. Joseph's family tried legal appeals, but every document, every notarized statement, every certified patent stood firm. They realized, painfully, that their assumptions had blinded them. Joseph came to the penthouse one last time, without lawyers this time. He brought no gifts, no excuses, just himself. I understand now, he said, voice raw. Everything you did. I can't say I'm proud, but I see you. That's enough, I replied, closing the door gently behind him. Recognition, after all, doesn't require apologies. It only requires truth to be seen. With the family reconciled at a distance, the house sold, and the foundation running, I finally allowed myself to breathe. My mornings were quiet, filled with tea and reflection. My afternoons were busy, mentoring, reviewing proposals, guiding young women. Evenings were mine alone. I watched the sun set over the ocean, the pink and orange sky a canvas for reflection. I often thought of the sticky notes that had marked my former home, the cruel symbols of entitlement and ignorance. Now, in my mind, I peeled them all away, room by room, leaving only space for clarity, gratitude, and peace. Recognition is a quiet, persistent force. It doesn't always arrive when you expect it, but it can't be stolen. The patents continued to bring royalties, but the true gift was knowing my work mattered, that my intellect, labor, and heart had created lasting impact. I received letters from CEOs, academics, and young professionals who had discovered my patent through research. They asked to meet, to learn from me, to understand how I had quietly shaped a legacy that everyone else assumed was someone else's. Each interaction reminded me that my story, once hidden, was now inspiring others to claim their voices. I often sat at the balcony late at night, notebook open, pen in hand. The ocean whispered below, a constant companion. I wrote letters, essays, reflections, and strategies. The mind that had been dismissed for decades now moved freely, creatively, unbound by expectation or oversight. I realized that the greatest freedom is not financial, though that had come, nor social, though recognition had been claimed. The greatest freedom is mental, the ability to think, act, and create without apology or restraint. Power is subtle. It isn't always loud or visible. It is patience, foresight, and the courage to act when no one is watching. I had been underestimated my entire life, erased quietly, dismissed as inconsequential. But that quiet had been my strategy, my shield, and my strength. When the moment came, when truth could no longer be denied, the world adjusted not because of anger or spectacle, but because facts, evidence, and intellect cannot be ignored. I expanded the foundation each year, supporting more women, more students, more innovators who had been overlooked. I visited schools, mentoring programs, and local universities, teaching young women not only technical skills but the confidence to assert themselves. I often recalled my own younger self, sitting by candlelight, studying financial law, crafting proposals, and making sacrifices quietly. I reminded each young woman, brilliance is quiet but cannot be hidden forever. And when it is revealed, it changes everything. Years passed, and life in Santa Barbara settled into a rhythm of purpose. I traveled occasionally for the foundation, visiting conferences and workshops. I wrote essays, spoke publicly, and met incredible women whose stories were as inspiring as my own. I cultivated a small garden on my balcony, herbs, flowers, and one stubborn pomegranate tree, a reminder of resilience. I cooked, read, and spent afternoons walking along the cliffs, the ocean a constant companion. Each day reaffirmed what I had always known. My mind, my heart, and my story mattered, and I was finally free to live fully in that knowledge. Looking back, I realized my life had been a series of invisible victories. I had been dismissed, overlooked, and minimized, but patience, intelligence, and courage had made all the difference. I had built empires silently, saved companies, nurtured families, and mentored generations, all without expectation of acknowledgement. And yet, recognition had come not as vengeance, but as truth finally catching up with reality. I had been the mind behind the empire, the heart behind the home, and the quiet force behind every success. And now, at last, I could simply breathe, think, and live, fully and unapologetically. The foundation continued. The patents continued to yield royalties, and my story reached more women every year. Letters arrived from around the world, thanking me for creating a space that acknowledged intellect and effort often ignored. I realized legacy isn't measured in money, titles, or status. It is measured in impact. The lives we touch, the opportunities we create, the truths we assert, and the courage to remain steadfast when the world tries to diminish us. I had survived, reclaimed, and flourished. The house was gone, but the lessons remained. The ocean below reminded me daily that time moves on, and so does growth. And in that flow, I found peace, power, and fulfillment.